The nurses told me he had been asking for me for 3 days. Not by name, just saying my son over and over while he drifted in and out, not conscious enough to hold a conversation, but conscious enough to reach for someone who was not there. I sat in my apartment 2 states away and told myself I had time. I told myself he was always stubborn, always tough, always the kind of man who outlasted everything. I told myself I would drive down on the weekend. I told myself a lot of things that were not true. Then my mother called. Her voice was different, not panicked, not dramatic, just empty in a way I had never heard before. She said if I wanted him to know anything before he went, I had 4 hours. She did not say where he was going. She did not have to. I made the call. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone twice. He answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was thin, almost gone, like someone had turned the volume down on the last words he would ever speak. But he said my name. He said it like he had been holding it in his mouth for years, waiting for permission to let it out. That conversation lasted 11 minutes. He died before sunrise. And after he was gone, I found out he had been carrying something I never knew. Something that made every year of silence feel like a crime I committed against both of us. The last real conversation I had with my father before the hospital was at a family cookout 2 years earlier. He was standing at the grill with his tongs and his beer, the same position he had occupied at every family gathering for as long as I could remember. I was telling my aunt about a project I had just finished, some work I was proud of, the kind of job that made me feel like all the freelance instability was finally paying off. My father looked over at me and said he did not understand why I did not just get a real job. He said freelance was not real work. He said the way he said everything flat and matter of fact, like he was telling me the grass needed mowing. I set my plate down on the picnic table. I did not say goodbye. I did not make a scene. I just walked to my car and drove away. That was the last time I spoke to him while he was standing on his own 2 feet. For 2 years after that, I let every voicemail from my father go unanswered. He called every month. Same time, usually a Sunday afternoon. I would watch my phone light up with his name, and I would let it ring and ring until it stopped. He never left a long message. Just the same words every time. Just checking in. Hope you're good. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he said. No, I was wrong, or I am sorry, or please call me back. Just checking in. Hope you're good. I deleted every single voicemail without listening to them twice. I told myself he needed to feel what silence felt like. I told myself he would never learn if I kept making it easy for him. I told myself a lot of things that made me feel better about being cruel. My younger sister got married 6 months before the call. She asked me to be there. She did not ask me to be in the wedding party because she knew I would not stand next to him. I sat in the back of the church behind everyone else, where I thought I could watch without being seen. My father walked her down the aisle. He was crying. I had never seen my father cry. Not when his own father died. Not when he lost his job. Not when my mother got sick. He never cried. But he cried walking my sister toward the man she was going to marry. Tears running down his face while he held her arm and smiled at her like she was the only good thing he had ever done. Halfway down the aisle, he looked toward the back of the church. He looked directly at me. I do not know how he knew I was there. Maybe my sister told him. Maybe he just sensed me. He did not wave or smile or change his expression. He just looked at me with tears on his face while he held my sister's arm and walked her toward her future. I looked away. I stared at the floor until I heard people clapping. Then I stood up and walked out the side door before the reception started. I sat in my car in the parking lot, and I told myself he should have said something different at the cookout. He should have called and apologized. He should have left a voicemail that said more than just checking in. I told myself I was right to walk away. I had been telling myself that for 2 years, and I was going to keep telling myself that until he died or I did. I just did not know which one was going to come first. I grew up in a house where my father worked 16-hour days and came home too tired to talk. He was a construction foreman, which meant he spent his mornings yelling at subcontractors and his afternoons fixing their mistakes. By the time he walked through our front door, he had nothing left. He would sit in his recliner with the news on and fall asleep before the weather report. I thought he did not care about me. I thought if he loved me, he would ask about my day, or come to my baseball games, or say something other than how was school while he was already halfway asleep on the couch. I did not understand until I was an adult that he was working double shifts to pay for my asthma medications. He was taking every overtime shift they offered, so he could afford the application fees for the colleges I never ended up going to. He was not ignoring me. He was keeping me alive, and I was too young and too selfish to see the difference. My mother called me on a Tuesday. I saw her name on my phone, and I almost let it go to voicemail the way I let my father's calls go. But something made me pick up. She said my father had been in the hospital for 5 days. Pneumonia that turned into sepsis. She said he had been asking for me at first, but then he stopped. She said he is not asking for much. Then she corrected herself. She said he is not asking for anything. He told me not to bother you. But I'm asking you. Her voice was tired in a way I had never heard before. Not angry, not sad, just worn down from 2 years of carrying messages between two men who were too stubborn to carry their own. I told her I would think about it. I hung up and I sat on my couch and I thought about the last time I saw him at my sister's wedding. The tears on his face, the way he looked at me from the aisle. I thought about the voicemails I had deleted, just checking in. Hope you were good. I thought about the asthma medications and the college application fees and the 16-hour days I had been too young to understand. I got in my car and I started driving toward the hospital. I drove for 45 minutes. I stopped at a gas station halfway there to buy coffee. I sat in the parking lot with the engine running and the coffee getting cold in my hand. I stayed there for an hour. I thought about walking into his room. I thought about what I would say. I thought about whether I was ready to say it. I was not ready. I told myself he had survived worse. He was stubborn. He was tough. He would pull through this the way he pulled through everything else. There would be time to fix it later. There would be another chance. I turned the car around and I drove home. I called my mother and I told her I was too busy with work. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she said okay, and she hung up. I sat in my driveway and I told myself I had made the right choice. I told myself I was protecting myself from saying something I would regret. I told myself a lot of things that night. None of them were true. I just did not know yet how few chances I had left. My mother called at 6 in the morning 3 days later. I was already awake because I had not been sleeping, just lying in bed with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the gas station parking lot and the cold coffee and the drive home. Her voice was different when I answered, thinner than it had been before, like she had been crying for hours but could not cry anymore because there was nothing left to give. She said the doctors said his organs were starting to shut down. She said he had maybe 24 hours. Then she said, I'm not asking anymore. I am telling you. Come. She did not wait for me to answer. She just hung up. I sat on my bathroom floor with my phone in my hand for 45 minutes. The tile was cold through my sweatpants. The sun was starting to come through the window. I opened my father's contact 3 times. I looked at his name and his number and the photo that came up every time he called, an old picture from before everything fell apart. I closed it 3 times. I rehearsed what I would say. I forgive you. Those are the words I have been waiting to say for 2 years. But every version sounded false in my mouth. I forgive you for what? For a comment at a cookout. For not saying I love you enough when I was a kid. For working too much and sleeping in his recliner and missing my baseball games. It all sounded so small when I said it out loud. 2 years of silence over something that could have been fixed in 10 minutes if either one of us had been brave enough to pick up the phone. My mother called again. I answered because I did not know what else to do. She said, Richard, if you do not call him now, you will carry this for the rest of your life. I asked her what if he does not forgive me. The words came out before I knew I was going to say them. I had been so focused on whether I could forgive him that I had never once considered that he might be the one waiting to forgive me. There was a long pause on her end. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, Baby, he has been waiting to forgive you. He just needs to hear your voice first. He thinks you hate him. I sat on the bathroom floor with the phone against my ear, and I tried to understand what she had just said. He had been waiting to forgive me, not the other way around. All those voicemails, just checking in. Hope you were good. He was not avoiding an apology. He was checking to see if his son still loved him. And I had deleted every single one. I had let him believe I hated him for 2 years because I was too proud to tell him that a comment about freelance work had broken my heart. He was not the one who needed to ask for forgiveness. I was. And he had been waiting on the other end of the phone, month after month, hoping I would finally call. Hoping I would finally let him off the hook for something he probably did not even remember saying. I could not sit in my apartment anymore. I drove to the park near my building, the one with the pond and the benches and the lights that stay on all night. I parked and walked to a bench facing the water. It was cold and dark, and I was the only person there. I called my older brother. He had been at the hospital for 2 days without sleeping. He answered on the first ring like he had been waiting for my name to light up his phone. His voice was a whisper. He said our father was asleep, but his breathing was bad. He said each breath sounded like gravel being poured through a tube. He said he did not know how much longer. I asked him if our father had said anything about me. My brother was quiet for a second. Then he said he needed to call. He said our father asked him yesterday if I hated him. My brother told him no. He said our father asked then why will he not talk to me. My brother said he did not have an answer. He said he had been lying to our father for me for 2 years, making excuses, saying I was busy, saying I was going through something, saying I would call when I was ready. He said, do not make me do it again. I sat on the bench with the phone against my ear, and I did not say anything for a long time. I could hear my brother breathing on the other end. I could hear the beep of a hospital machine somewhere in the background. I realized something I had never let myself think before. My father did not even know why I walked out. He probably forgot the comment about my career within an hour of saying it. It was just something he said, the way he said 100 things over the years that did not mean much. He was not keeping score. He was not holding grudges. He was just a tired man who worked too much and said the wrong thing sometimes, and then went back to work. I had been punishing him for 2 years for a crime he did not even know he committed. I had spent 2 years telling myself I was the wrong party, that I was the one who deserved an apology, that I was being strong by not giving in. But I was not strong. I was cruel. I was punishing a man who had paid for my asthma medications and worked double shifts for my college application fees and showed up to everything I ever did even when he was too tired to stand. And he did not know why I had stopped talking to him. He just knew his son hated him. He was waiting not to apologize. He was waiting to be allowed back in. And I had left him standing outside for 2 years with no explanation and no end in sight. I stood up from the bench and walked back to my car. I did not know if I could undo 2 years of silence in one conversation. I did not know if the words would come out right. But I knew I could not sit on that bench anymore. I knew I had to try. My mother sent me a photo from the hospital. I opened it sitting in my car in the park parking lot. The light from my phone was too bright in the dark. My father was asleep in the picture. Oxygen tubes in his nose, the kind that loop around the ears and leave red marks on the cheeks. His hand was resting on the bed rail like he had been reaching for something in his sleep and had given up halfway through. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The man who lifted me onto his shoulders at county fairs, who carried bags of concrete mixed like they weighed nothing, who worked 16-hour days and still found the energy to throw a baseball with me in the backyard. That man was gone. In his place was someone fragile and almost gone, someone whose hand could not even stay closed around a bed rail. I called the hospital nurse's station. I did not think about it. I just dialed. A woman answered, and I asked if my father was awake enough to talk on the phone. She put me on hold. I sat there listening to terrible music, and I thought about hanging up. I thought about driving home and pretending I had never made the call. Then she came back on the line. She said my father had been asking for someone named Richie. She asked if I knew who that was. I said yes. That was me. That was what my father called me when I was a child. Richie. Not Richard. Not son. Richie. The name he used when he put me on his shoulders. When he taught me to ride a bike. When he tucked me into bed after working a double shift and falling asleep on the floor next to my mattress. No one had called me Richie in 20 years. I had forgotten anyone ever did. The nurse said he was asleep right now, but she would have someone wake him if I wanted. I told her no. I told her I would call him myself. I hung up, and I checked my phone again. My mother's text said 4 hours. That was almost 2 hours ago. I had 3 left, maybe less. I stood up from the bench and walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat with the door open and the cold air coming in. I opened my father's contact again. I stared at his name and his number and the old photo I never changed. I pressed call. It rang once. It rang twice. I thought about hanging up. I thought about letting it go to voicemail the way I had let every call go to voicemail for 2 years. I thought about saying I would try again later. But I did not have later. Later was gone. Later was a luxury I had burned through on cookouts and weddings and gas station parking lots. I let it ring a 3rd time, and then I heard him pick up. I heard his breath, thin and wet and barely there. And then I heard him say my name. Not Richard, not son, Richie. He said it like he had been holding it in his mouth for years, waiting for permission to let it out. I opened my mouth to speak, and I realized I had no idea what was going to come out. I just knew I had to say something before he stopped breathing, before the line went dead, before the 3rd ring turned into voicemail, and then turned into silence, and then turned into the rest of my life. He answered on the 3rd ring. I heard his breath first, thin and wet, like air leaking from a tire that had been patched too many times. Then he said Richie, just my name, not a question, not a greeting, just my name like he was testing to see if he could still say it. I said, "Yet, Dad, it is me." My voice cracked on the last word. I did not care. There was a long pause where I could hear him breathing, and I could hear machines beeping somewhere in the room, and I could hear my own heart beating in my ears. Then he said he was hoping I would call. He said it like it was nothing, like he had not been waiting 2 years, like he had not asked my brother if I hated him, like he had not been reaching for something in his sleep. Just I was hoping you would call. That was all. I told him I was sorry for the 2 years of silence. I told him I should have called sooner. I told him I should have come to the hospital. I told him I should have done a lot of things, and I did not do any of them, and I was sorry. He cut me off. Not harsh. Gently. The way you cut someone off when you are too tired to listen to them punish themselves. He said he did not care about the silence. He just needed to know his son did not hate him. I told him I never hated him. I told him I was just angry about something stupid at a cookout 2 years ago. Something he said about my work. Something that did not matter. Something I should have let go of the same day. There was a pause. Then my father laughed. It was a small sound, broken at the edges, and it turned into a cough that went on for too long. When he came back on the line, he said he did not even remember what we fought about. He said he remembered I walked out. He remembered I stopped answering his calls. But the fight itself, the words, the reason, gone. He had carried the weight of my silence for 2 years, but he could not carry the reason because he had never known what he did wrong in the first place. Then he said something I will never forget. He said, "I know I was not easy to love." He said he was gone all the time. He said he missed baseball games and birthdays and school plays. He said he tried to make up for it by working harder, by buying things, by showing up when it mattered most. But he knew it was not the same. He knew he was not the father I deserved. He just needed to know I tried to love him anyway. I sat in my car with the phone against my ear, and I listened to my dying father tell me he thought he was hard to love. I listened to a man who lifted me onto his shoulders, who paid for my asthma medications, who worked 16-hour days so I could have a future. And I realized he had been carrying something I never knew, a belief that he was not enough. A fear that his son would grow up and see him the way he saw himself. He had been waiting not for my forgiveness. He had been waiting for proof that he was worthy of being loved at all. And I had let him wait for 2 years while I pouted about a comment at a cookout. I asked my father why he thought he was hard to love. The question came out before I knew I was going to ask it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the machines. I could hear the weight of 60-some years pressing down on a man who never knew how to say things out loud. Then he said because he was not there. He said he was always working. He missed my games and my school plays and everything that mattered. He told himself it was for me, Every double shift, every weekend, every holiday he spent on a job site while other fathers took their kids to ball games. But he said he thought he was just scared. Scared he did not know how to be a father who stayed in the room. I told him he was there, just differently. He came to everything that mattered. He taught me how to change a tire, how to throw a punch, how to stand up straight when everyone else was sitting down. I told him I remembered him showing up, not to every baseball game, but to the ones that counted, not to every school play, but to the one where I had the solo. He was not the father who coached the team. He was the father who worked double shifts so I could play it all. That was not nothing. That was everything. My father cried on the phone. I had never heard that sound before. Not at his own father's funeral. Not when my mother got sick. Not when my sister walked down the aisle. He never cried, but he cried now. It was quiet at first, just a catch in his breath, something he tried to hide. Then it got louder, like something breaking open that had been sealed shut for too many years. I sat in my car in the dark, and I listened to my father cry, and I did not try to stop him. He needed to cry. He had needed to cry for a long time, and he was finally somewhere safe enough to do it. When he stopped, his voice was different, lighter, like something had been lifted. He said he should have said it more. He said, "I love you, Richie." He said he had always been proud of me, not of the freelance work or the career choices or any of the things he did not understand, just of me, of who I was, of the man I had become despite him. I told him I loved him too. I told him, "Dad," not Richard, not father. Dad. The word felt strange in my mouth after 2 years, but it tasted right. Then I said something I did not know I was going to say. I told him he could rest now. He did not need to carry it anymore. The guilt, the fear, the belief that he was hard to love. He could put it down. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Yeah, I think I will." He said, "Thank you for calling." Those are the last words he ever said to me. He died 4 hours later, before the sun came up. And I sat in my car in that parking lot, and I did not feel sad. Not the way I thought I would. I felt released, like I had been holding my breath for 2 years, and someone had finally told me it was okay to let it go. I stayed on the phone after my father stopped speaking. I did not hang up. I just sat there with the phone against my ear, and I listened to him breathe. The breaths were slower now, more spaced out, each one further from the last. I could hear the nurse moving around the room, the squeak of her shoes, the beep of a machine I did not understand. Then the nurse came on the line. She said my father fell asleep with the phone still pressed to his ear. She said he was smiling when he closed his eyes. I asked her to leave the phone there. "Do not move it. Let him hold it if he wants." She said okay, and I heard her set the phone down gently on the pillow next to his head. I drove to the hospital anyway. I do not remember the drive. I do not remember the exit signs, or the turns, or the parking garage where I left my car. I just remember walking through the doors and giving my father's name to a woman at a desk and walking down a hallway that smelled like disinfectant and regret. I arrived at 3 in the morning. The room was dark except for the lights on the machines. My father was asleep. The phone was still on the pillow beside his head. I sat down in the chair next to his bed. I took his hand. It was warm, softer than I remembered. The hand that had taught me to throw a punch, to change a tire, to stand up straight. I held it, and I did not let go. I did not sleep. I just watched his chest rise and fall. The morning light came through the blinds slowly, the way winter light comes, gray and soft, and too early. I watched his face. He looked peaceful in a way I had never seen him look peaceful before. The lines on his forehead were smooth. His mouth was slightly open. He looked like a man who had finally stopped carrying something heavy and did not realize until that moment how tired he had been. He died at 6:47 in the morning. I was holding his hand. His chest rose once, twice, 3 times. Then it did not rise again. The machine did not beep or alarm. It just went quiet. His hand stayed warm in mine for a long time after. My mother was on the other side of the bed. She had been there the whole time. I did not even notice her come in. Neither of us said anything for a long time. Then my mother said he was waiting for me. She said he held on until I came. I looked at the clock. 6:47. The 4-hour window my mother had given me was shorter than I thought. I had 3 hours left when I made the call. Maybe less. He was not going to last through the night. He was not going to see the sunrise. But he held on. He held on long enough to hear my voice. Long enough to hear me say, "I love you." Long enough to put down the belief that he was hard to love. I sat there holding his hand, and I wondered how close he had come to dying without hearing my voice one last time. One more day of silence, and he would have gone without it. One more week, and he would have believed his son hated him. One more month, and I would have carried that for the rest of my life. I did not have one more month. I had 4 hours, and I almost wasted them. 3 days after the funeral, I went through my father's things. My mother said I did not have to. I said I wanted to. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched me open drawers and sort through boxes. Most of it was what you would expect. Old tax returns, work boots with the laces still tied, a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Foreman," a gift from my sister that made him laugh every time he used it. Then my mother handed me a box from the back of his closet, a shoe box, worn at the corners. She said he told her to give it to me if anything ever happened. I opened the box. Inside were ticket stubs, dozens of them. Some were faded, the ink almost gone. Some were still bright. I pulled them out one by one and laid them on the bed. Kindergarten holiday show, 3rd grade science fair, 5th grade band concert, middle school baseball playoffs, high school drama club performance. Every single event I had ever been in, from kindergarten through senior year. Every game, every play, every night I stood on a stage or a field and looked for him in the crowd. He kept every ticket. He kept every one. I picked up the oldest ticket, kindergarten holiday show. I was 5 years old. I remembered wearing a paper vest and singing a song about snowflakes. I turned the ticket over. Written on the back in my father's handwriting was "Richie was the star." Best day of my life. I sat on the edge of my parents' bed with that ticket in my hand, and I started to cry. Not the way I cried at the funeral. That was grief. This was something else. This was the weight of 2 years of silence crashing down on top of me. He was not absent. He was watching from the back of every room. He was working double shifts so he could be there for the nights that mattered. And I never saw it. I was too busy being angry about the nights he missed to notice the nights he showed up. He had been carrying proof of his love in a shoe box in his closet, and I never knew. He thought he was hard to love, but he was the one who loved harder than anyone. He just did not know how to say it. I called 4 hours before he passed. He answered on the 3rd ring. In 11 minutes, we undid everything I'd spent 2 years building. The silence, the anger, the belief that I was the one who needed to forgive him. I learned that forgiveness does not travel in one direction. My father needed to forgive himself for being human, for working too much, for missing some things while showing up for others. And I just needed to tell him he already had. He did not need my permission to be loved. He just needed to hear my voice saying he always was. Do not wait for the right moment. The right moment is a lie. Pick up the phone. I'm over at where silence ends. Have you ever held onto an anger so long that you almost missed your chance to tell someone they were already forgiven?